So today we do not have a guest speaker, as I said earlier. We're going to be doing an open discussion on the industry, what's working, what's not. So again, if you have any discussion points that you're like, I think this would be something that the group really could benefit from, drop it in the chat, raise your hand. Um, I have a couple of questions to kind of get us started, but we really want to kind of have an engaging conversation today on that. So feel free to come off camera or come on camera, not off camera, and really kind of have that debate in an engaging conversation. So the first part that I thought we would start off with is maybe some quick wins or some field updates. So I'm going to open up the floor to this group. If anybody wants to share any recent progress, I know it's pretty early in the season, but has anybody deployed or trialed a new robotic or autonomous piece of equipment that we haven't talked about yet? And don't be shy today, so it's an open discussion. Um,
I put Kaya and Jeff on the spot. I
yeah,
see.
I was just gonna call on them.
I was just about to pop on.
Sure.
I didn't want to be the first one, but we can certainly go.
Perfect.
Yeah, so a few things have been rolled out already in the spring. Actually, our deployments have all, I think, pretty much been wrapped up. We've got a few things that we're still working on, but we've had our Oz's all delivered, so those all have gone successful. We have a farmer as far as north of Elma, Quebec. And he's going to be using or retrofitting the Oz to straddle the rows, which will be interesting to see. Something new for us to see, and maybe a game changer in the sense that instead of just between the rows, this will go over rows. So things like strawberries, other crops that maybe are hilled, things like that. So we'll keep the group posted on that. One of our biggest successes so far has been the verdant sharpshooter that we brought in the fall or in the early winter. Sandy Shore is probably about 100 plus acres in with it, and they're having great success. They're having some challenges when they run into a bit of a carpet of weeds, which we thought would happen anyways, because our weeds are very different here than they are in the US. We have these big flushes. We get lots of rain. The cool temperatures will bring on the weed growth really fast and furious. So going fairly slow through those patches and working through some of the challenges there. One of the things we're working on um, with them is figuring out how we can spray weeds in crops that also have cover crops. So we're working with Verdant as well to change the AI and the vision systems to pick up both the rye cover crop as well as the onion crop that's planted. Um, so yeah, so those are some of the big updates. I've had some demos done as well with our burrow corridor, which is a the burrow with the mower attachment on that. We're having success with that mower as well, and then the crest mowers as well are doing well. The more commercial, residential slash robotic mowers. Those are a nice piece of equipment. You have a nice GPS cart that you map your area with. You can put in your obstacle detections, and then it charges on its own and it just mows along all day, 24/7. So that's a nice piece of equipment that we've brought in as well, and that's new to us. Um, and then I know we've picked up a UV light system from the research center in at the Muckset station that we're going to have at the office. So we haven't deployed anything with that yet, but I think the plan is to put that on a burrow and do some testing in berries for things like powdery mildew, things like that. So that's sort of a quick update for us. I don't know, Kaya, do you have anything to add to that?
I have a few things, more so on the innovation farm side or like the research side. The farm droid up in Smith Gardens, it I believe has completed planting. I'm still waiting to have kind of like a data call with folks up from there, so I won't be able to share any results from that. But that was the farm droid expansion that we got funded through the ARWG funding. So that was from what I've heard, pretty successful, but data to come. In terms of innovation farms, I think a couple weeks from now, me and Ashley talked about maybe I'll do a presentation on the actual technology that I'm testing there. It's less so robotics, more so ag tech. So we're working with a few companies this summer, including Gecko, which is like a weed management platform. They detect weeds using satellite imagery from your like from historical years to kind of tell you areas of your field that might be problematic so that you can maybe increase your spray or your seeding or kind of whatever management practices you want to take from that information you're able to do. So we are testing this year a couple projects with them just to see kind of how effective their technology actually is to detect the weeds. Mira Terra is another company we're working with that like that project has already started. That's a soil, kind of similar to Gecko, but it's with soil, and they have a really big data platform, and they also use satellite, and then they kind of tell you to go out and instead of taking 100 soil samples, maybe you only need to take 25 from areas that are very problematic that they can sense from their platform. So we've been testing that. The Piquetta is one that I think I've talked about on this call a few times. We're testing that this year again. They made a bunch of improvements to Piquetta in previous years. We were kind of helping make the models, so we were scanning. That one's a tissue sensor, so you scan tissue for crops instead of sending them to the lab, and it will give you your results immediately rather than waiting a week or so for your tissue sample results for your nutrients. For the Piquetta, in previous years, we were just helping them build the model. So we were scanning like hundreds of samples to help them build out what would be effective. And now we're actually testing to see how effective it is. And so far, so good. Their new platform, you're able to scan or you're able to select GPS coordinates on a map that you're able to make on their platform, scan, and that actually creates a map, which is phenomenal. Being able to see in the field actually where that scan happened and maybe like the difference in nutrients, just like your typical nutrients, like you're looking at nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, those kinds of things. Um, Other than that, we have quite a few more projects that I won't go into. Probably like 10 or 11 projects this year happening at Innovation Farms. So hopefully I'll maybe put together some sort of presentation and do something more formal later on when we also have some results to talk about as well.
Yeah, we'll save those for a future presentation, so we
Yeah,
won't give everything away today on
yeah.
that. Thanks. That's a great update. Conrad is interested in learning more about the UV light tech, Jeff. So he's open to having a offline chat about that. So if you two want to
Sure.
connect offline on that,
Yep.
that would be great.
Good.
Okay. Any other new pieces being trialed this year? Conrad, are you doing any new trials or tests on your equipment?
Yeah, I think certainly we will. We're just in the final stages of um, closing up some contracts, some funding contracts that we're just trying to finish off. Don't want to speak too much ahead of time. Don't want to jinx it. But hopefully in the next week or 2 weeks, we should have it all cleared up and know exactly our game plan and the timeline what we're going to do. So yes,
Okay.
we do definitely have some plans on that. Yes, correct.
Okay, that's great to hear. Yeah, maybe we can
We
have
should
you
be very
on
close.
yeah, later in the season to get an
Yeah.
update on that. That would
Uh,
be fantastic.
Yeah, definitely will do that. Looking forward to it. Thanks.
Okay. Dan, is there anything at Vineland that's new this season?
Um, can't confirm yet. So we have in we have the demo day coming up on the 10th of September for the greenhouse, which we know is going to have a tomato trial. I'm waiting on confirmation if we'll also be having a cucumber trial. Cucumbers are a nice quick crop that opens up the possibilities to lots of new technologies. Not confirmed yet, but I think close enough to confirm that I can give it a little teaser now. So
Okay, perfect. If you want to send me some information on that demo day too, I can add it to our agenda, even though it's greenhouse related and not field crops. We're happy to kind of promote that for you.
sure, yeah, we'll do.
Okay, great. Um, Kate also put a link to Innovation Farms website, as Kate did a great job revamping some of the website for it. So if you are interested to see the results from 2025, feel free to go to that link there. Kate, you have different Kate. You have your hand up next.
Yes, I just want to mention a win for SIWA that happened this week. So we were formally invited into the USA Grand Farm pilot, and that's thanks to the AgRobotics Working Group, because John Mann came onto this working group and presented the opportunity to us, and we were able to capitalize on that. So we met with both the University of Georgia team and then the North Dakota State University team this week and finalized what that trial would look like. So they are focusing on weed identification and destruction. So they'll be using laser weeding and electricity and autonomous robots. And then they'll be flying drones for us, and we'll be processing the imagery and hopefully providing tools that can actually help them evaluate the other robots and things that they have in the field. So we'll be able to say this was the weeds before, this was the efficacy, and these are the species you're still missing or have herbicide resistance with. So very exciting. And what's I going to say? Yeah, so we'll be working on cotton, Vidalia onions, and peanuts in Georgia, and then in North Dakota State will be sugar beans and soybeans. So we hope that we can take a lot of the learnings from those crops and bring them here to Ontario farmers. But we've been very impressed with the speed at which the USDA Grand Farm team has moved, how they're able to get members from all the universities to collaborate on calls very quickly. So pleased to see how well it's been moving, and we'll be updating the group on how it goes.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Yeah, again, we would love to hear an update later on in the season once you have some results on that as well. Perfect. David.
I'm this is just a follow on for Dan. I'm just wondering if you could update us on what's the state of the art for robotic picking of, cukes and tomatoes. I mean, everybody kind of immediately a long time ago it was like let's get robots to pick, but then everybody switched over to other things like disease and diagnostics and anyway, and so I'm just interested, what's the state of the art that you're aware of, or what are you doing, or where in the world are people proving that model out?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, you're right. A few years ago, there was a big push for automation in greenhouses, and harvesting was for sure the the first goal that a lot of people had. And you saw a lot of startup companies building robots for picking tomatoes in particular. That was the big target. We at Vineland, we kind of opted to leapfrog over tomatoes and go to the second highest crop for cucumbers. So we built a cucumber harvesting robot that was a AFC funded project that ended in 23, I think. Um, and it's in its commercialization process now. Now you may wonder, what's holding them back? Why aren't there robots harvesting in greenhouses right now? And I think ultimately it comes down to the ROI is very tricky, right? Most of these robotic pickers are using 6 or 7 degree freedom robotic arms, which are expensive and slow. They all use vision systems that are generally context dependent and somewhat limited. Um, so I think, the ROI for harvesting is not as strong as some of the other greenhouse activities like you've mentioned. So I know there's a lowering robot that's coming on the market out of from Aruga, a company out of Israel. So that's for high wire greenhouse and tomato production. Those plants once a week or so they get lowered and leaned, so they're hanging from a spool up at the top of the greenhouse, and once a week or so somebody has to come along and flip that spool over and let out 6, 7 inches of line. So there's a promising robot coming out doing that. Um, Deleafing robots are showing up on the scene as well. But yeah, there's hasn't yet been, a real immersion on the market for harvesting. I think there's lots of discussion we could have about why that is. Yeah.
And I do have a question later on in some of my questions about is the ROI conversation shifting as well? So I think that kind of all contributes part of it too, of where's like the ones that are worth it essentially. So we'll go back to that in maybe in a bit. Mark, you want to do a quick update on behalf of Michigan?
Yeah, sorry about that. Had to get to my unmute button here. Yeah, I'm Mark Letterber from Application Insight, and I work with Mike Rinke at the Southwest Research Michigan. Let me try that again. I got Friday-itis. Southwest Michigan Research and Extension Center. They purchased an AgTech autonomous orchard sprayer, and they have it deployed this year. And they're just using it. They're trying to use it for as much stuff as they can on the station there. Those of you that haven't seen that before, it is a fully electric, or it's a diesel electric, I should say. It's got a diesel power plant on it, and then all of the locomotion, the sprayer actuation, everything is electric. Anyway, and so obviously the season's just started, but they have been using it, and as they know more, and Mike tells me, I'll share it with the group.
All right, that sounds great. I'm just going to mute some background noise here. Sorry about that. Perfect. Any questions for Mark? Or we'll just find out some more information later on the season as well. Okay, perfect. Anybody else want to kind of give an update on what they're trying this season? Okay, so we'll maybe move on to the next discussion point that I have. I'm gonna leave that for a future one. There is some proposed changes to drone regulations, so I thought that might be a good discussion point too. So I guess the first one is if the drone regulations are changing, Health Canada is proposing to allow drones to spray agriculture pesticides that are approved already for aerial application. Do we think this will increase adoption? Is there research there to support it? I know, Kaya, you said not all the research has been positive. So I'll open that to the group next. Or anybody who has worked closely with drones before want to contribute. Kate, sorry, Ian, do you want to go first?
So I guess my comment is that those that want to spray haven't really let the rules get in their way. And so I think there's a significant amount of adoption out there that just
That's just not been tracked.
it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so will you get that much more? I don't know the answer to that, but yeah.
All right.
It appears that things are ramping up, though, just by the number of new players entering in and more aggressive marketing, plus the big DGI and XAG. Look, the sprayers are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So as we track it, there's probably more momentum today than there's been in the last 10 years because it's not new. We've been playing with drones for 10 years and they just they've been kind of on the sidelines. Chuck got in trouble probably 5, 6, 7 years ago for experimenting on his farm with them. When they saw he was trying to spray some stuff for testing, they got mad. So I don't know. I think it could be something bigger. It's going to be a niche product, I think, more for specialty crops because the scale and scope compared to a real floater is a sprayer is they're tiny compared to them.
Yeah. Mark?
Yeah, I'm happy. I want to just share a little bit of our experience over here. So one of the biggest things that, and since, as you point out, it's the wild, wild west, and in the U.S., it's kind of the same thing, only about conservatively 30% of drones are getting registered. The rest of them are just being bought and used quietly. And we know this because we know sales volumes, and then we know how many people are actually going to the Federal Aviation Administration and registering them. So, but there's two problems that are coming up that I'm sure Canada will not be that different, because Canadian farmers and US farmers are not that different. You may take umbrage at that, but for the purpose of this conversation. Anyway, nobody is aware that the drone manufacturers are not talking at all about swath measurement. And I'm going to massively abbreviate this. I give long talks on this almost weekly, but what happens is they tend to advertise the maximum width use case. You know, for example, if you're doing a spring burn down with systemic herbicide, residues don't really matter, and you can get away with very, very low coverage at the edges. And so you can get really, really wide swaths. It's not uncommon with some of the larger new drones, to get 45, 50-foot swaths.
Ooh.
If you're putting out a pre-emerge, now, am I saying that's responsible? That's a different story. However, can it be done? Yes. If you're putting out anything with residual activity, you're going to get an inverse striping, where you'll suppress plant growth in the middle because of residues that may be 20 times higher than at the edge. And we've seen this for the last 2 or 3 years, massive striping, especially with late season fungicides. And Jason DeVoe has done a huge amount of work on this on your side of the border. He's really kind of leading the pack in all of North America on trying to understand swath. But the other big thing that's going to come down the pike, nobody understands wind shift. And some of this is because, one, these are new tools operating in areas that we don't understand very well, as far as heights and speeds and the droplet sizes from the rotary atomizers. But the second thing that I'm sure you're going to see, because we're seeing it, drones have become a recruitment tool into agriculture. And on this side, we haven't seen recruitment of people into agriculture since John Deere invented the moldboard plow, which is exciting. You know, we brought over 10,000 new people into agriculture as pilots just a year. The problem is, most of them have never sprayed even a can of Raid roach killer, much less commercial agricultural crops. And the marketing on these things is that the drone does all the work and makes all the decisions. The capabilities are higher than people realize, even with realistic swaths. So they are competitive tools, but there's a lot of cognitive dissonance in this community, just because it's bringing in new people who don't know what they don't know. And with a lack of education, you wind up with an echo chamber of backslapping. I'm doing a good job. Oh yeah, I'm doing a good job. And everybody tells each other they're doing a good job. And then eventually they believe their own stories. So I'll hand the mic back here. But this has been our experience for the last 3 or 4 years on this side. Speaking with your Canadian applicators, I suspect it's not that different. And there are certainly easy opportunities to fix this, but they need to be recognized. Thanks.
Perfect. No, thanks for that insight. Matt, you had your hand up first. Oh, you're breaking up a little bit there. Okay. If you want to put maybe your question or your thoughts in the chat, I can't hear you where you're at right now. Ian, you had your hand up next.
I just want to back up what Mark said there. I think that's very pertinent. I think the other piece about that too is the business case or the business model that these drone applicators want to go out and use, and they want to do as wide a swath as they can get away with. And it may not be adequate to give us the level of coverage that we're used to with ground rigs. And so that's going to be a problem. I saw it with the fertilizer application in wheat that was done with drones this spring. And I've seen the work that Jason's done. I think that's, back to the lack of comprehension of agriculture on the part of a lot of these new entrances, they won't get the impact of having a 10-foot boom width versus a 12-foot, right? And so they'll go for as wide as they can because they can get the acres done faster. And so that's going to take some education, and it's going to take some farmers having to scream at them for poor efficacy. So I'll leave it at that.
We'll go to Caesar next.
Yeah, just wanted to mention some work that Jason is doing right now. I'm not gonna talk about the results, and even though I've seen them because I wait for Jason to process all that data, but last week actually he was doing a lot of work on drone on swath width and droplet distribution. And Mark, if you're still there, like what a great tool the swath gobbler is. That's a tool that Mark developed to measure the swath, the amount of deposition throughout. In our case, it was 100 feet swath, but you can make it as long as you want, and you can process all that information in a very efficient way. It's much, much more efficient than water sensitive paper. That's just a side comment. I'm very impressed with that tool, Mark, and I recommend to anyone that is into this field that is very interested into it to use it. Regardless of that, Jason is going to be publishing some of this information, very detailed, very high quality information regarding swath width at different spray speeds. I found it fascinating, and it's by no means comparable to a field sprayer, as a lot of you might already know. But it's a completely different distribution pattern. And anyways, I'll leave it in there and be surprised with the results whenever Jason publishes. But be paying attention to it's going to be published in Sprayers 101.
Okay, perfect. Do you know roughly when he's thinking about publishing it?
Was thinking in the next couple of weeks, probably.
Okay.
It's a ton of data for him to process. We did a lot of repetition. I was helping him to do that.
Yeah. I can tell you they did over 50 reps, which is staggering. Not to toot our own horn on the technology, but I do actually want to backtrack a little bit for people that don't know what the swath gobbler is, and I'm not going to sit here and sell it, but what I do want to, it uses a method called continuous swathing. And you don't need to buy this is a great tool for anybody who's in the drone space. You don't need to buy a swath gobbler to do it. You put down receipt paper and put some dye in your tank. And every drone applicator should be doing this. It's the basic level of just walking their swath and making sure that it's doing what they think it's doing. Sorry, I butted in, but it seemed appropriate.
No, it's okay. That's what today's about, is having that open discussion. For it as
Also,
well.
Jason publishes, as soon as he's got the data, he puts stuff on Sprayers 101. So I know he's working on it right now, as Cesar said.
Okay.
Yeah,
Dan.
once that's ready, I'll share it with this group. I'll share the link. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, I'm just going back to Matt before we go to you, Dan. Sorry. Matt put his comment in the comments. He's just in some spotty coverage right now. He's been excited about using a spray drone on their orchard. He attended a training day for growers in December. His main takeaway was that it's incredibly complicated for tree crops, managing not only the swath width, but also the downforce management to push into the canopy and wind shifts across the tree profile. So just adding on to Mark's comments, he said that it's far more complicated than I think most people realize as well. And I think there's a couple other comments in the chat that is speaking to that as well, about hard to reach areas, odd shaped fields, for example. Okay, Dan, if you want, you can go next.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, maybe a bit of a naive question because there's clearly some folks in the call here who are, really into drone spraying. But I guess my question for is the challenges with regulation, is it about the quantity of chemicals used, or is it about off-target application? And is there a special consideration for variable rate, or something with a closed loop feedback that might be you're using a vision system to apply only where there's weeds, for example, which should actually reduce the total quantity, and also just the fact that you can get out there earlier than wheel-based sprayers, so you may be able to reduce quantities there. I'm just wondering about what the considerations are for regulators, and if you can talk more about that, I'd love to learn from you.
Yeah, Mark has his hand up there, so I think he might have some thoughts.
Not a regulator, but we don't have enough time on this call. Those are great questions, all of them, and the questions everybody is asking. So you're right in the pack on that. Wow, I didn't even know where to start. The you know, it's mostly about first acre cost as much as my entire life I've been trying to increase minimum coverage, increase precision, reduce off-target losses. But one of my mentors, literally back in the 80s when I was still a teenager, taught me that a spray well timed always beats a spray well applied, but timed poorly. And the thing that drones have is their ability to time sprays, because muddy fields don't matter. Now, they're using them in a lot of situations where they probably shouldn't, where the wind is too high and things like that, but because they don't know any better yet. And that'll shake out, unfortunately, probably through a lot of people's losses. But the reality is they can get out in more places faster. And so, especially like you say, in weird, so that, and the other thing, if you're looking at buying a high cycle for canopy sprays, if you're looking at buying a high cycle, your first acre cost is $750,000. By the time you get the machine, the shed to store it in, the machine itself, the other support equipment, whereas your first acre cost with a drone is somewhere in the neighborhood of $100,000, and that includes the vehicle to haul it around, the tender, the drone, the extra batteries, the charging. And so, and you've got a machine that can realistically do 30 to 40 acres an hour, and optimistically, they advertise them at 60 to 80. I think oftentimes that's a little crazy. But still, a 40 acre an hour machine is not a bad machine for $100,000. And so that's kind of the calculation people are going through. And regulatory wise, I think, we're kind of doing the same thing you guys are doing with aerial, using aerial rates. And of course, the drones want to do that because they have really limited payloads, so they make a lot of money at 2 GPA. And I'm worried about this. I think we are going to have an apocalypse coming of accelerated chemical loss. Not because we're going to lose them regulatorily, but because we are applying too many areas of the field too close to lethality. And one of the things, sorry, I could talk about this for hours, and I'm going to wrap it here real quick. But if you think about a drone as one single nozzle, a really big nozzle, but one nozzle, it starts to make a lot more sense. Airplanes, helicopters, they actually have a swath that's relatively uniform, assuming that the applicators are professional and they've tuned it out. But a drone never does. It's always, I don't care if it's got rotary atomizers or nozzles on it, the air and the spray mix and create a roughly Gaussian or bell curve underneath the drone. So think about it like a single nozzle. So you would never go and put a nozzle every 6 feet on a row crop boom. That would be bonkers. You'd obviously stripe the tar out of things. Is there going to be spray in the middle in between them? Of course there is. Just not enough. So thinking about them that way and thinking about the overlaps, there's usually very little penalty for being too overlapped, but there's a huge penalty for being not overlapped enough. All right, I could keep going, but I think that could hit a few of the major, how would you do it points. I also make a shameless plug for Sprayers 101 resource of Air Blast 101. If those of you that are doing specialty crops or woody perennial crops, you can pick up a free copy of that by just Googling Air Blast 101. I also have printed copies for sale on our website at betterfieldstudies.com. But anyway, if you're using a drone as an air blast sprayer, they're really effective that way, or they can be. And so there's basic fundamental methods within that book on how to evaluate them.
Perfect. Okay, I think Ian has his hand up next if you want to jump in.
Just a comment to Mark. I'm pretty sure, Mark, you're from Michigan. Um, the prices that Mark gave add at least for 30 to 35% to that in terms of Canadian dollars. You literally can't put a self-propelled a high clearance sprayer in the field for under $1 million now. And the other thing is, from a regulatory standpoint, unless they've changed it, I don't think they have, different from the US, is we have an efficacy proof requirement that they don't really have. They sort of let the Wild West go to work in the US, where we're trying to tame that a little bit here. And then the other aspect is it's up to the applicant, so the holder of the registration, to decide whether they want to seek an aerial application or not. And they may be too worried about the liability on some of these things to do that. And so it's a bit of a double-edged sword there. Leave it at that.
Perfect. Caesar?
Yeah, very well said, Mark. As always, communicating these complex issues in a very simple way to understand. I will disagree with just one thing you say at the end, that there is little penalty to overdosing. That's actually one of my main concerns. I'm as concerned as I am for the overdosing that might occur. And maybe not a big deal for field crops, but definitely for horticulture, like overdosing can be a big problem, especially when you have a narrow margin of tolerance on herbicides. That can really, and I can tell you like real case, I know that has happened and has happened to the point that it has completely destroyed crops. If you go above the threshold where the crop can tolerate it, if it is a stress or even if it is not a stress, like it really cause a lot of issues that overlap or even that very um, pronounced bell curve or even like a triangle almost that you get with a drone. You might, if you're overdosing that much right below the drone, that can cause carryover issues. It can cause a lot of phytotoxicity, and even from the consumer side, I think it might even cause higher residues than acceptable based on the rates that were defined per hectare. You are getting much higher rates on those very hot bands, and who knows what's going to cause to residues in the final product.
Absolutely. I'm going to address that really quick. I don't know if there are any other hands up, but so there's actually two totally different things that we're talking about here, and I'm really glad you brought this up. One is dose. Because if you've never flown a drone, which I'm guessing most of the people on this call haven't yet, you tell the drone what the swath is. It has no idea. The swath is a purely calculated thing, and then it adjusts flow. They are variable rate sprayers, by the way. It adjusts flow. And to the prior gentleman before Cesar made a comment to his point, they are not closed loop. I suspect that will be changing, but a lot of the drones that are out there, the controller is sending out a signal that says, do this. Does it know that it did that? It depends on the model. Usually the answer is no. So just when the controller is telling you that the drone is doing something, caveat emptor. But we're talking about both uniformity of coverage and coefficient of variation and then dose. They're interrelated but very different things. So when I talk about, to clarify what I was saying with there's no penalty for more overlap, what I meant specifically on that was your CV tends to improve. You'll hear a lot that drones have horrible coefficients of variation in their application. And if you're making these very, very wide swath paths, that's true. The coefficient of variation can be 70% or more, which is, of course, atrocious. And as Cesar pointed out, if there's residues that are an issue, that's a real problem. And that's almost always the case. But as you get closer and closer together, you can achieve CVs of 10 to 15% with a decent drone if the right droplet size and the right overlap is chosen, which is equivalent to most ground booms. It's just that most people aren't doing that yet because not enough people are actually going out and measuring swath and doing that work ahead of time. Okay, I'll hand it back.
Oh, we lost Ashley, it looks
Sorry.
like.
I'm back now. My Zoom froze again. Okay. Sorry, I missed the last little minute there. Mark, were you able to finish your thoughts while my Zoom dropped?
I was,
Okay,
and I'd
perfect.
actually like to totally change the subject. I'd like to query this group before people drop off, if I could, for the Great Lakes Tech Flex. I'd really love this group's input. We are going to be we're spending some time this week and in the next few days formulating the day 2 of the Tech Flex. And those of you that haven't heard, just a 20-second recap. This is an in the dirt demonstration meeting in Michigan. The idea is to try and regionalize some of the exposure to this agricultural technology rather than make it state level focused. The second day is about bringing stakeholders in and figuring out how do we reduce the barriers to adoption on this technology. And some of these barriers are not obvious, like we have problems in the US with a robot, if it touches pavement on a government road, has to be a roadworthy vehicle. That's a problem. So you can't literally drive across the road from one field to another. It's a solvable problem, but currently that limits adoption for us because you have to bring a semi, load the thing, move it 50 feet across the road to be legal. Anyway, what I'd love to hear from people are barriers to adoption that they've seen so far. And this could be regulatory, this could be financial. If you're going to run a robot 8,000 hours a year, it's really hard to do a 7-year depreciation on it. It ain't going to be there in 7 years. But what are the things that you might want to see talked about, and the stakeholders that you'd want to see present on in discussions about accelerating adoption? So I'd love to hear.
Chuck's not here this morning, so I'll pinch hit for him. The regular farm equipment, and Brad's on here, so maybe Brad Baker, maybe some of your comments would be good because he's from the traditional farm equipment side. But most robotics companies don't have distribution because they're so new and untested, and so that last mile service logistics, local testing just hasn't happened because, Deere, Case, AGCO have had a 50-60 year start, right? So a lot of the technology, sharpshooter, the Verdant sharpshooter, carbon laser weeder, they've had to go almost directly to the farmer to get into place. And North America is a big geographical area to cover logistically. You're always in the wrong spot. Your customer's always 6, 8, 10 hours drive away. So I think one of the things that is really a serious barrier is that service, training, education, all those pieces. Like, people like Chuck have had to actually go out and try to find the technology and then do a lot of it themselves. So I think that's a huge barrier. Plus the technologies are moving so quickly, everything from AI and vision systems, things that you couldn't do 5 years ago, 10 years ago, now you can do because, we have Starlink, we have, all this new technology coming. So I think we all recognize that robots are going to be a major opportunity for agriculture for productivity gains. It's just not going to be overnight. It's going to be, almost like the internet, and it didn't happen quickly. But 25 years later, you have to, pry a smartphone out of the farmer's hands, right? Because they're checking their markets, their news, their, all these other tools. So I think distribution and then the technology speed are a couple of the big barriers that with time, we'll overcome them.
What what specifically would what would you want to talk about on speed as far as what could we solve with regards to helping or at least discuss or bring awareness to people as far as a facilitated or a panel discussion on that?
Well, I think just even having a tech flex or stuff like this, it's bringing awareness to farmers and the opportunities. So I think that's kind of the first step is to start sharing so people it gets on people's radar. Might be you know until it's on people's radar, they out of sight, out of mind, right? So
Right.
I think that's a
Thank
good.
you.
I think it's a good first step having these events.
Dan,
Excellent.
your hand was up first.
Yeah, thanks. Just another response to, what's holding back adoption. This has been something we've been addressing at Vineland for a few years now, particularly within greenhouse, but also in field and orchard as well. And I think really the biggest challenge is making a convincing case for the ROI for any tech. And for us, up until recently, I think there's the major challenge was, we therefore you need to do a validation study, but who's going to pay for the validation study, right? Most of the startups and tech companies, they're already toward the end of their runway when they're ready to deploy, and they don't necessarily have the funding for a validation study. We tried government grants years ago and that, had some success but there's always limitations there. And I really think looking at venture capital and venture capitalists is perhaps a good source for funding validation studies because ultimately they're de-risking their investment by funding a validation study before they make a larger investment into new technologies. So it's really, basically a part of the diligence arm of venture capitalists, I think, and we're seeing that too, right? With innovation farms and with the huge these grants coming from FCC, I think it's moving along now. But I think, up until the last year or two, that's been a big barrier.
Could I paraphrase that to that we need to get venture to change its paradigms as far as timelines and where they're putting their capital? Is that a correct paraphrase, Dan?
I was more thinking specifically about the whose role the validation or who's most interested in doing a validation. Is it the growers? Is it the tech companies themselves? Is it the investors, really?
Gotcha. Thank you.
Investors are very short-sighted and cheap.
Not all of them, but but certainly it's a trend. Yes.
Okay, we only have a couple more minutes, so I just want to make sure we get the last two questions that have their hand up. Conrad and then Brad after that.
Yeah, so I think the ROI part is very important, and just intuitively, I mean, I actually would like to know that the question as well, the answer to that question as well. But intuitively, as a robotics guy, I think it also has to do that a lot of robots right now are single purpose. That means that you use them only for a certain period of time, for a certain process. And I'm wondering if that is one of the holdbacks as well for adaptation, that they cannot be really used for throughout the year. You have them maybe for only for a short period of time, for 3 or 4 weeks that you need them, and then they're just sitting around. Also, from our point of view, it actually becomes a problem too to actually test those processes as well. Having enough time on the farm to actually make sure they work properly. So, anyways, that's kind of my thoughts.
Yeah, that shared or that limited window situation for northern growers is a huge one, and that's definitely going to be on our discussion.
All right, Brad.
Yeah, just coming at it, as Joe said, just as a former manufacturer and even a dealer as well in the traditional market. I mean, there's a whole bunch of points everybody, hit on in this group already. Talking about the distribution side, I mean, the reality is the traditional ag equipment distribution system in North America is dominated by the big three or three and a half egg equipment manufacturers. And then the reality is, even for a short line equipment manufacturer, traditional equipment manufacturer, it's really difficult to get the dealers time and energy focused on doing anything but managing that main line. We've seen some niche dealers pop into the market over the last few years that specialize more in precision agriculture, precision planning focused dealers as well, focus on customizing and optimizing certain types of machinery. I think the optimistic view on that is that there's an opportunity there, and that there might be an opportunity to start forming a distribution network around AgTech. Good individuals and businesses that are focused on getting the market educated on how to deploy the product properly, and able to be 100% focused. That might be a bit of the missing link, and something that needs to also kind of develop in tandem with these ventures that are starting to manufacture AgRobotics and other type of AgTech product. I had another point here too, and I completely lost my train of thought, guys. But I think there needs to be some attention paid to traditional farmers and how they manage their capital as well. A lot of farm fleets are managed on a cyclic basis, and they're managing the depreciation of assets. They're managing how to optimize kind of the trade cycles on traditional equipment and things like that, and to understand how they invest their capital is maybe something that needs a little bit more time and attention, especially in these ag tech groups, because you're really going to have to get in there with a fine-tooth comb into the financial side of their business and understand how that's going to integrate as well. It's not just an economic problem you're trying to solve. It is an economic problem as well. It is not easy to change your fleet over. And we're seeing this in even some fringe areas like organics and other types of areas where there's a need to invest in different types of machinery, and there's a lot of wheel spinning going on because that problem hasn't been solved there either. So just a few thoughts just coming from the traditional side.
Perfect. Okay, I think we're gonna end the questions or in discussion there. So thank you everybody for the great discussion today. There's a lot of activity in the chat going on too. So if you haven't seen that, take a look at some of the discussion there. We'll be having more of these open discussions more often. I would like to have them every couple of months because I think it's important to get updates from people who aren't necessarily going to do a full presentation, but want to just give a quick update on what they're doing and sharing these thoughts and discussions. So next week we have John from Evermore AI. He will be discussing demystifying AI for agriculture. So it'll be an intro to AI for agriculture as well. So don't miss that next Friday at 9. Other than that, thank you for your time and your participation again, and then have a great weekend.